Hi, we will see Airtel Payments Bank Limited, how it's further financial inclusion, especially in India. Our group consists of Farid, Rafi, Ashraf and myself. First, we will see the environmental factors and how it impacts payment banks. Specifically in India, India has more than 1.3 billion expected population in 2020. It is quite high number of population. Secondly, they also have high mobile phone users with expected 1.2 billion in 2020. Internet users also high. They are expecting around 650 million in 2020, while smartphone users is around 520 in the same year. So these are actually based on BCG and Google report focusing in India. Why these environmental factors are important, especially for payment banks, because in order for you to use their service, usually the payment banks will require you to install their app, mobile app, in your smartphones, and it requires internet data so that you can complete any transaction.
Thank you, HAAZIQ. So, hi everyone, I'm MOHAMAD RAFIUDDIN ZULFADHLI. So, I'm going to talk about the SWOT analysis that we have actually performed on Airtel payments. So, SWOT analysis is the analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the company. So, as we know, there were about 11 companies that have been granted the license to conduct air payments activities by the Reserve Bank of India. In fact, Airtel Payments was actually the first company that was granted full license by the Reserve Bank of India to conduct these activities. So the strength of the company, so as we can see, Bharti Airtel was actually the largest telecommunication company in India. So what does this mean? So they actually covered about 87% of the India's population in terms of mobile network. So basically they covered the vast majority of the population. They had about 1.5 million retail outlets in India, and it already had an existing digital platform. So therefore, we can see that digitization of payment would be a simple task for this company. And then Kotak Mahindra Bank, it was actually one of the industry leaders in India in 2016. So this company would actually help the partnership in terms of the implementation of cash in and cash out services such as branches and ATMs, and also business correspondence. So its knowledge and connections within the financial industry would actually give a competitive advantage to the partnership. So the existing distribution channel such as ATMs and the existing customer base for Airtel users can be considered as strength for the company. And also among these competitors, Airtel Payments were actually offering the highest interest rate on deposits at about 7.25%. Let's go to weaknesses. So despite its strength, they actually had some weaknesses. So we can see that some of the weaknesses in terms of price competitiveness, even though they were offering about the highest interest rate on deposit, but in terms of transaction fees, they seem less attractive compared to compared to its competitors. For example, when it comes to cash withdrawal at the ATMs, they charge about 5 to 25 Indian rupees for cash withdrawals up to 4,000 Indian rupees. Whereas some of its competitors were actually able to give a you know to waive the transaction fee for the first 3 cash withdrawals in metropolitan areas, and then for the first 5 cash withdrawals in non-metropolitan areas. And on top of that, some of its competitors also gave higher insurance coverage, and also they offered debit cards for their users, whereas Airtel Payments don't. On top of that, they are also facing some ethical issues recently, whereby they were accused, or they allegedly open accounts without the user's consent, based on their customers' database, and they also failed you know uh, to inform their customers that they have opened an account with Airtel Payments. So their image have been tarnished by this controversy. So they have to come up with strategies to overcome this issue. As air payments is a new segment in India, so we can see that this has presented several opportunities for the company. For example, the large India's unbanked population. So the unbanked population in India stood at about 233 million in 2016. So then even the financially included population were considered as new to banking products. So this can be an advantage, or this can be an opportunity for Airtel Payments to actually tap the untapped market. So, and also there is a change in payment trend recently globally, whereby people are choosing people are preferring more cashless transactions. So there is a digitization trend, and also the customer base is growing. So for example, mobile phones were largely used in India, where actually more than 320 million people in India use them to access internet in 2017. So the number was also expected to increase to more than 460 million by 2021. So we can see that the customer base is growing, and also we can talk about the remittances from overseas to India. So they had the highest amount of remittances sent back home in 2017. So the amount was about 65 billion US dollars. So this figure, or this number, is expected to grow by 3.5% in 2018. So among the rural areas, we can see that there is an untapped market, and there is an opportunity for Airtel Payments to tap this market, that the customer base will be growing. And let's go to threats. There are several threats that Airtel Payments will face. So for example, as we know, air payments is a payment only business, so their only income is on transaction fee. So the business model is about high volume but low margin, so they have to tap the most market as they can, and also they have to reach to the mass as quickly as possible. They have to reach to the mass market like quicker than their competitors, because the switching cost is actually low, and also they have few products. For example, traditional banks can actually lend capital to their customers, but air payments businesses cannot actually lend their capital to other businesses or to their customers. This can actually help the bank to earn 4 to 10% more. So and then we can see, when we talk about low margin, we are expecting about less than 1% margin in the air payment segment. And finally, the market saturation. Since the beginning, they already had 11 players in the segment, and these players are very significant players. They had their own competitive advantages. So this can be a threat also for Airtel Payments. Thank you very much.
Highlight the possible role of Airtel Payments in financial inclusion and how it can promote inclusive growth. So since we are focusing in financial inclusion and inclusive growth, we will see first the number of population in the world that are unbanked. In 2017, there are around 1.7 billion adults, which are actually defined as more than 15 years old, that are unbanked, and out of this, more than 20% of them are actually in India. How Airtel Payments can provide or assist in inclusive growth is by penetrating towns and villages in rural areas, around 29 areas, states, more than 100 villages. They also target deep rural market of unbanked or underserved people in India. Thirdly, they also roll out together with a high number of merchants, so that their users can actually transact at these merchants, around 15 to 20,000 merchants, all this in all the states. How this can be achieved is by, since people of India, most of them, those are actually unbanked, are actually had no previous contract or involvement in the formal banking system. Now they have this payment bank that they can access via their mobile phone. Using some basic features that are available on their phone, they can actually access or complete banking transactions. This is very convenient, especially for those if they want to do money transfer and remittance, whether it's domestically from India, capital of India, to the rural villages.
Hi everyone, moving on. So my part will discuss on the viability of Airtel Payments Bank business model. Now, the question begs, how does Airtel Payments be ahead of its competitors when it offers a relatively high interest rates of 7.25% compared to other payment banks in India, whereby they offer between 4 to 6% of interest to its customers. Now, what strategy is Airtel Payments trying to make? So before we further discuss on this analysis, now, as we know that the payments bank business is a relatively new concept in India, and these citizens, they have long deal with the traditional financial banking services, and they pretty much are not aware of these kind of contemporary banks that offers basic financial services through digital communications. Now, this poses a challenge to all payments bank, where it needs to educate the people to become more aware and attract them to use their services. Now, the issue here is whether Airtel Payments Bank Limited having a good strategy to impose higher interest rates compared to its competitors. Okay, now we talk about the regulations of the bank. Now, in India, they have the Reserve Bank of India, which regulates all their financial services. We have studied that these regulations are very stringent, and one of them is that the RBI limits a maximum of rupees 1 lakh per account. 1 lakh mean 100,000 rupees per account, and these payments bank cannot offer loans or credit facilities to its customers. And they have another type of regulation whereby 75% of total demand deposits are required to be reinvested in government-linked security bonds and treasury bills, which have relatively low, very low interest rate returns of 6.3 to 7.25%. Now, how do these contemporary banks make profits out of difference of losses about 1%? So it's very difficult for them to gain profits, after they have to pay the interest to its customers at 7.25 and cover its operating costs. Okay, next. Now, compared to its competitors, AP Bank have very limited product offerings, and it does not promote debit cards to its customers, as well as it charges a high percentage fee amount per withdrawal and online transactions that may attract fewer customers to register and maintain loyalty with a bank. So the issue here is they may not seem to be an attractive option for the customers. whereby they could find other cheaper banks that offers a wide variety of products to cater their needs. Now, the main plus side of the customers having an account with Airtel Payments might be the interest rate returns that they get from their deposits. However, there's always there's always an outset from those benefits, whereby they have to pay higher percentage transaction fee. Next. Okay, based on our analysis, we conclude that the risk involved in AP bank business is high and not viable, although high interest rates are offered. Now, since its initial operations, there had been many reports of losses for 2 consecutive financial intake, and there are more debt intake to be made, and the ROA seems a negative figure, which signifies that the firm or the bank is not efficiently using its resources. Okay, now we can see I have made the analysis using the financial ratios, one using debt to equity, and second using current ratio, and third using the returns on assets. And also we have display here the changes in profit after tax in percentage for the financial year 2016 and 2017. So it's significantly negative. So this is the formula of the net sales over the net income over the net sales. Now we have the debt to equity ratios, which shows that the amount of dollars that we have to cover up the debt, and the current ratio is the current assets over the current liabilities, and the return on assets shows the total liabilities, total assets to cover its total current liabilities. Okay, so next. So my next part will discuss on the unethical practice. Why is it unethical for Airtel Payments to have access towards the customer's information without their consent? So the situation arises whereby Airtel Payments had opened the accounts for its customers without telling them that, hey, we're going to open the account for you. Okay, so what's the problem here? So according to the Reserve Bank of India, it is considered a serious offense due to the non-compliance of operation guidelines, and it had impacted the AP Bank's reputation, whereby their licenses to carry out the eKYC of customers had been banned. Now, we know that it is difficult for them to acquire customers, due to the unawareness of these people to change into the digital communication through banking. And therefore, what it had a bigger implication towards the people's trust, and incurred major losses as well as huge fines for failure to adhere to the rules. Now, another situation allegedly claimed that the LPG subsidy had injected money from the percentage of customers that the Airtel Payments Bank had made. So, knowing that the licenses were bad, they claimed back the money that they had credited to the savings account. Okay, now we quickly discuss on why unethical practice arises. So it's mainly due to the inflexibility of guidelines that create opportunistic behavior among business management to identify loopholes and leverage to their highest benefits. The mounting pressure to stay competitive ahead of the market and stay dominant and relevant. These loopholes should be extensively reviewed by RBI, and they should also offer guidelines, innovative guidelines to provide solutions to these banks.
Payment bank industry is very competitive. Currently, they are competing not only among themselves, but they are also competing with the other banks. Currently, there are 11 approved companies to operate as a payment banks. 5 of them are telecom companies, 2 delivery companies, 1 mobile wallet company, 1 information technology company, 1 non-banking financial institution, and 1 government entity. Payment bank, the scope of business is very limited compared to banks. There are certain services that they cannot provide compared to the banks. However, in terms of compliance, they are almost similar with the bank. So even though they do not offer a full range of bank services compared to banks, however, their compliance are almost similar to the banks. And in terms of revenue, they only generate about 1 to 2% of banks compared to banks revenue, so it's very small margin. And plus they are not able, one of the things that they can't do is to create a multiple account for their depositors. So in a way they are very competitive, and in terms of cashless transaction, there's no incentive, so there's no reason for depositor to actually use their services in terms of cashless. So in a way, in overall, the payment bank are very competitive compared to other banks, and this is actually create a lot of issue in regards to the performance of the payment banks. Is Airtel payment bank financial performance is impressive? Let's look on the figures. Based on net operating working capital, there was an increase of 61%. Total operating costs, there's an increase of 58%. Meanwhile, a net operating profit after tax, there is an increase of 4%. However, in net cash flow, there is a decrease up to 1,330%. In terms of operating cash flow, there was a decrease of 13%. And their free cash flow is at negative 544,045 Indian rupees, which is, based on their cash flow, is not very impressive, even though there is a lot of positive figures. However, the most important thing is their free cash flow, as they do not have enough free cash flow to actually contribute or expand their business, as their free cash flow is at negative situation. Meanwhile, in terms of the financial ratio, their profit margin wasn't that positive. It's been decreasing, and their profit is basically dwindled down. Their total asset turnover also, there's a decrease in terms of their turnover, and their return on equity is also decreasing. From single digit, it increased to double digits. Their equity multiplier also decreases slightly, and overall their DuPont model is decreases. In a way, based on the data given, the financial situation of Airtel are not very impressive, as they are actually consider losing money. However, there is a lot of capital coming in, but they do not actually making any profit or enough revenue to actually move them to the next level. So we can see that there is a potential that the Airtel might not be able to expand their business to a next level.